Hello, my name is Austin, and this is Go Access, a YouTube channel dedicated to access in higher education and disability rights. Today, I will be giving my opinion on note taking and why it is the last frontier for access in higher education. The problem currently is that colleges and universities are spending a lot of money to provide note taking services to students with disabilities. Smart pens and apps like Sonocent, which is a note taking app, cannot replace note taking services. Note taking is almost never graded or listed as an in class assignment. So, note taking is a skill that requires students to effectively monitor their attention, assimilate the professor's lecture, and write down the key concepts. Students who need extra time to process information, have difficulty with memory, retention of facts, and executive functioning, may have a hard time taking accurate notes. So the question is, what is the solution? Well, currently the solution has been smart pens and Sonocent. Smart pen, just to make clear though, is a pen that records the lecture with special paper. You tap on the paper, it plays that part of the lecture. Um, the other the most common smart pen used is the Echo Smart Pen, which, as I said, records the lecture and syncs it with the special paper, and the student can tap the pen and play that part of the lecture. But that does not help the student get the key facts and actually assimilate those distill the lecture and find those key concepts. It does the student's still required to actively go through that process and really process the information that the professor's providing. And that leads to, if it's too time consuming for the student to go through that process and access that information, that is where you need to pay for a note taker for the student if you're work in a disability office. Similarly, Sonocent records the lecture in a way that the student can break it up into labeled chunks. The student can break up the lecture so that all the important stuff is labeled in separate chunks, where it's easily accessible, and play back that lecture integrating the professor's slides. Um, Again, the big problem there is that just takes time, just like the smart pen. And for students who have slower processing, that can be too time consuming, and that's where a disability office will most likely either do one of three things. They'll have either a note taker that is paid. I think that's the best because then they're more likely to give accurate notes. They may have a note taker that is voluntary, which again may not have the most accurate notes, or they may try and give like a gift card to the local bookstore, some type of you know get discount on tuition, and some tuition rebate or something, some way of trying to pay the student that's not directly cash. But in any event, they have to that money adds up. And the other last thing people talk about is transcription. For seeing the entire lecture does not help you pick out the key concepts, and therefore students with disabilities who have processing delays, it will still take them too long to break that up for it to be um, a way of replacing note taking and having a paid note taker. So again, I guess the last thing I want to mentioning those concepts is that there is one more way for a university or college to deal with note taking, and that is to outsource it. There's been like that push to have the Uber of note taking. Right now, that is Notetaking Express, where people are paid probably very low wages because you can get an hour lecture that you record transferred into notes for around $12-13. So you have to imagine that the person that they're paying is very cheap, and you don't know what the quality is, but you could get a very good turnaround, like 24 hours for that hour of audio. And again, that just comes down to the payment, and also it could be a time issue and a quality issue that comes into play. So my point here, outlining all of that and some of the obstacles in note taking for students with disabilities and making note taking accessible to everyone, um, is that the current philosophy is really focused on my notes versus your notes. It's, you have your notes, I have my notes, I'm not going to share. And it's not looking at it in terms of our notes. And that's what it needs to be, our notes. Because that would allow us to actually start to integrate note taking into the course, have everybody kind of sharing their ideas, and that's where it should be going. But right now, there's no grade connected to note taking, and students don't share what they're writing, and professors really aren't involved. So if you go to an our notes philosophy, note taking could be something that is a collective process. All the students in the class could contribute to the collective notes of that day. The professor could check the notes and add any missing information. You can, if it became something that's required to provide three key pieces of information from a lecture, most students with disabilities could provide something like that, three to five key pieces of information from the lecture. The issue is when you start asking to get the entire lecture, what are the key points, where it becomes daunting. If the lecture is 2 3 hours, that's very hard for a lot of students to distill. But getting just a couple concepts that they remember written down, that is definitely much more doable. um, and if we were to have that done where the whole class is contributing, you really think that you may only need one or two things from each person to get a whole piece of that lecture. If the professor looked at those collective notes, they could fill in any missing information, and it would make things a lot easier. So I really think the solution here is like a Google Docs document, where after the lecture, a Google Docs document is sent out, or even during the lecture, where every student can go in, write one or two key concepts. The professor then checks it, makes sure everyone has from the class roster has filled out one or two things, adds any other pieces of information that needs to be there, and then you have the entire notes available to the class, and you're not having to spend tons of money for a note taker. And just to put it in perspective, if you're spending, let's take a number of like $10, $10 to $15 for note taking, that means that you're paying probably, either per class or per page, because some people do it by the page. You're looking at a lot of money, because if you have 80 students using that, each semester, that just adds up. It becomes thousands and thousands of dollars, being spent on note taking, where it could be much more affordable to use something like Google Docs. And as I said, requiring two or three contributions, professor would check the notes if there's any missing info. Professor might complain about a little bit extra work, but it could save the college and university a lot of money. And that's really the key point here. Do I think this is the future? I think eventually we will see that probably happen. I'm not sure when though, but I think a collective note taking philosophy needs to kind of slowly develop, and will probably be tested, and I think be very successful. It is going to take a long time before any technological solutions can really replace a student or a person taking notes. I think that is the technology just will not be there, because it's very difficult to synthesize the key concepts. It's a lot easier to make a transcript or provide other assistive tools for the note taking experience. But I think, we're replacing student or a person taking notes is not going to happen, at least in the near future. And higher education institutions need to adapt and try and save money. I think this is a good strategy that could do that um, and really help. I just want to thank you all for listening, and please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.